welcome back once again to another video with me, your host, Nikki Ray. I'm sorry. I need to find a way to actually start these videos without being incredibly cheesy. It's every time now. We'll think about it. We'll think it through. We'll brainstorm. It's fine. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for clicking on this video, being intrigued about the story that I'm about to tell you about. How many times did I say about in that sentence? Also, I broke my thumbnail. It's really upsetting. Today I'm going to be telling you all about the brutal murder of Shanda Sharer. Let's just get straight into it, shall we? Okay, this is Shanda Sharer. In this story, she is 12 years old, but in the photo she does look older because, you know, this was the 80s, early 90s, so the hair and makeup back then did tend to make people look, you know, just a little bit older than they were. That's why she looks about 16, 17. Shanda was born on the 6th of June, 1979, in Pineville, Kentucky. Her parents were Stephen Sharer and Jacqueline Sharer. And Jacqueline and Shanda were actually very, very close. Like, obviously they were mother and daughter, but they were everything to each other. They were very, very close, almost like best friends. Unfortunately, Shanda's parents got divorced, and Shanda went and lived with her mother because obviously they had a very, very close bond. One thing that people noted about Shanda was that she was always very popular. Like, she was always the girl that got along with everybody. So even when she relocated and went to a new school, she didn't have any trouble making new friends. Like, her mother always described her as like a social butterfly and someone that could just fit in no matter where she was. She did a lot of sports in school, like a lot. She was on the cheerleading team and the volleyball team, as well as the softball team. She did a fair few. More than I did. In 1991, her mum relocated to New Albany, Indiana, which was actually a very, very thoughtful, nice thing for her to do because that was close to Shanda's father and stepmother, which most parents wouldn't do after a divorce, like move closer to each other. But the family was still very, very close even after the divorce. So Shanda's mother moved them closer to her father so that she could still see her father. Because obviously she moved house, Shanda had to start a new school and actually enrolled in Hazelwood Middle School. Now, this school was a lot bigger than the ones that she was used to. But like I said before, she didn't struggle with fitting in anywhere. So when she got to the new school, she just fit in. She made friends very, very easily. It wasn't difficult, even though she did have the, like, you know, the first day nerves. That was very quickly overcome by the fact that she could make friends. At this new school, she met a girl called Amanda Heverin. Now, Amanda was kind of like a bully at this school. Like, she always targeted much younger kids in the school. Like, she was 16. So when she saw Shanda, she saw her as this, like, shy, awkward new kid that she could just easily bully because this was essentially an easy target for her. So she does approach Shanda and a fight breaks out. Not a very big fight, but nonetheless, a fight breaks out. Obviously then the teachers knew about it. I mean, if there's a fight breaking out, it's not exactly going to be silent. The teachers found out, they got a week's detention. They put the bully and the victim in the same detention for a week. Where's the logic? Anyway, it didn't end up being a bad thing because, well, actually, in the grand scheme of things, it was a very bad thing, but no one was to know it was going to end up like it did. But we're skipping too far ahead. They were in the same detention and actually became friends. They got close during the detention time, and over time they became closer and closer, and it actually ended up becoming a romantic relationship. This is how most friendships start, though, isn't it? Where you start off not being friends and then you become very, very close. Like, most of my friends in school thought I was going to be mean. I don't know why, but they did think I was going to be mean for some reason. I'm not, though. I'm actually a very nice person. This did actually start to worry Shanda's mother a little bit, even though she wasn't, like, completely aware of the fact that it was a relationship, because she thought they were just very, very close friends. But she did start to worry because this relationship actually started to take a toll on Shanda's grades. She started developing an attitude. She got in trouble a lot at school. None of this was like her in the slightest. Now, the year is 1991 and Shanda and Amanda, we love a rhyme, attend a school dance together as each other's dates. At this school dance, Shanda meets a girl called Melinda Lovelace, who was 16 years old at the time. So another older person. Now, something about Lovelace is that she is Heverin's ex-girlfriend. I'm going to start calling them by their second names, by the way, because a lot of these names rhyme. So we got Shanda, Amanda, Melinda. It can become a little bit confusing, so I'm going to go by their last names. Lovelace and Heverin are ex-girlfriends. And whilst that relationship was still a thing, Lovelace could be very jealous. You know, you're 16. Everything is so dramatic while you're 16. So as you can imagine, seeing her ex-girlfriend with a new girlfriend isn't going to be fun for anybody involved. Lovelace actually ends up confronting Shanda at this school dance and actually attempts to start a fight with her, but Heverin steps in and stops anything from happening. Okay, we're going to do like a little tiny deep dive into Lovelace for a second. I'm not going to go too much into her family life because it is very, very dark and intense. It involved a lot of physical abuse, mental abuse, and sexual abuse. Now, there is stuff online about the specifics, like what actually would happen to her and her mother and her two sisters from her own father. It's there if you want to read it. It's very disturbing. So we're going to leave it at the fact that her father would abuse her mother, her two sisters, and herself in many different ways. What I will say was that this obviously made her very, very unhappy and traumatized by what obviously she'd encountered throughout her life. And this actually led to her attempting to take her own life on quite a few occasions. You know, she's experiencing fear and conflict on the daily, which is obviously going to make anyone feel uneasy and anxious at all times. Now, back to the party. At this point in Lovelace's life, she did actually have another girlfriend, but this didn't stop her from being jealous of the fact that her ex had turned up with someone else, because she did actually want her ex-girlfriend back. So much so that she actually turns to Heverin and says, "You have to decide, me or her?" And, I mean, obviously Heverin chooses Shanda. Lovelace did not like this and actually threatened Shanda, saying, "If you even try to talk to Amanda again, I'm gonna f***ing kill you." In any normal argument, especially at that age, if someone was to say that, you'd think that they were just angry. They were just saying words to try and come across a bit more threatening, maybe scare you just a little bit, but it's like, you're not going to take it literally. Like, you wouldn't think that there was actually, you know, a plan. Like, they had their mind set on that. But Lovelace actually stuck to this threat and actually wrote it in letters to Heverin, like just expressing her desire to kill Shanda. Now, there's two ways of looking at this. On one hand, you're like, why would you write it down, like put it in writing, if it was still just words? But then also, you've got to think back to when you were 16 and how heightened everything felt. And also, at 16, you're not really thinking of the consequences of if you write that down. Like, she hadn't really thought it through. Shanda's mother, who, again, like I said, was very, very close with Shanda and actually knew a lot about her life, knew about all of this. And obviously now she knew that the relationship between Shanda and Heverin was romantic because of everything that had happened, you know, like the threatening and why she was threatening, then it all becomes clear. So because of this, her mother transfers her to the Our Lady of Perpetual Help school to try and keep her safe. Like, that shows just how worried she was about her little girl. Now, she had no problem with the fact her daughter was in a same-sex relationship, but one thing she did have a problem with was the fact that she found letters from Heverin to Shanda that contained a lot of explicit things. Now, it's worth noting again that Shanda was only 12 and Heverin was 16. Within weeks of starting her new school, Shanda was back to being her usual self, you know, pre-Heverin. Like, her grades were back up, she didn't have an attitude anymore, she wasn't getting in trouble in school, everything was just back to normal. Now, just because Shanda started a new school, it didn't mean that she was out of harm's way when it came to Loveless and her threats, because Loveless was still very, very jealous of the relationship between Shanda and Heverin. Even though Shanda and Heverin weren't seeing each other as much, it wasn't as intense as it was when they went to the same school, because obviously now she's moved school. But this didn't stop Loveless from devising a plan to get rid of her. Yes, in that way. Now, because she is devising a plan, she involves her friend Laurie Tackett, who was 17 at the time. Despite only meeting a few months before this, they had a very, very strong friendship. Now, Tackett was described as a very unapproachable person. She was quite intimidating, had a very hard exterior type of look about her, and very rarely showed emotion. And when she did, it was very little and discreet. Both of them joined a group called the Alternatives. It was only made up of a few people, but it was a group of people that they liked to call the Alternatives. Now, at this point of joining the group, Tackett doesn't know anything about Shanda, but she does have this very deep sort of fascination with killing. It's something that she's vocal about kind of wanting to do, which is, it now clears up why Loveless wanted to involve Tackett in the plan. On the 10th of January 1992, a plan was put into action. They recruited 2 more people, and that was 15-year-old Hope Rippey and 15-year-old Tony Lawrence. Lawrence was kind of intimidated and wary of Tackett at first because she was older, and they kind of felt like there was this kind of power imbalance between them. What we've heard so far, it kind of implies that Loveless and Tackett were like sort of like the leaders of all of this, and then Lawrence and Rippey were the just kind of like backup, almost like passengers in all of this. They weren't as like, yes, we want to do this, but they were kind of too scared of the leaders to say anything. When people would talk about Lawrence and Rippey, they would describe them as overachievers in school. Like, they were definitely above average students, and they never did anything out of line, never got in trouble in school. They just kept to themselves, kept their noses in their books. On this day, 10th of January 1992, the 4 of them were going to a gig, and Tackett picks up Lawrence and Rippey, and once they're in the car, Tackett turns to Rippey and says, "Have you told her?" Lawrence had absolutely no idea what was going on and was like, "What do you mean? Tell me what?" And then without any hesitation, like literally jumps in. Tackett says, "We're gonna kill a little girl tonight." Now think of this as if it was your reality. I know, dark. If you were getting into a car with your friends, you go into a gig, that's all you think is happening, and then one of them says that to you, you're not gonna immediately jump to the thought that they're being serious. You're gonna just think that they're trying to make a joke. It's not a funny joke, but you're gonna just laugh it off and be like, okay, whatever. So that's what Lawrence did. She just kind of brushed it off, and then they all went and picked up Loveless. Lawrence and Rippey had never met Loveless at this point. Like, tonight was the first night that they were meeting. But that didn't stop Loveless from doing what she did next. When she got in the car, she pulled out a kitchen knife and said that she was going to use it to kill Shanda. But then very, very quickly changed her story. She probably changed her story because there was clearly a reaction from Lawrence and Rippey. I mean, that's not a normal thing to say. So she very quickly changed her story and was just like, no, I'm only joking. I'm just going to use it to scare her a little bit. Now at this time, Shanda was actually staying with her dad for a few days. So the 4 of them drive up to the dad's house. How do they know where the dad lived? Because, I mean, they weren't friends. The complete opposite, actually. Would it have been in the Yellow Pages? No. I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't exist. Anyways, they drive up to the dad's property, and Loveless hides in the car because she does not want Shanda to know that she is there at that point, because she knew that if Shanda saw her, there was no getting Shanda in the car. So Lawrence and Rippey were instructed to go up to the door and tell Shanda that Heverin was waiting for her in an abandoned building that they like to call Witch's Castle, that was near Ohio River. This was a very popular place for teenagers to hang out, so it wasn't a completely bizarre place to suggest to meet up, but also Shanda was very aware of the fact that her dad would not let her do that. So she told them to come back at midnight so that she can sneak out, because then her dad would be asleep. This clearly annoys them all a little bit because, you know, they were hoping to do it there and then. They all agreed and they went to their gig, had fun at the gig, I guess. And then it gets to around 12:30 a.m. and the group drive back to Shanda's father's house, where then Shanda sneaks out. Now at this point, Lawrence is very concerned about what was happening. So she didn't want to get involved with luring Shanda out of the house, which meant that Tackett had to go with Rippy to get Shanda from the house. So Shanda gets in the car and she is completely unaware that Loveless is under a blanket in the back of the car, holding the knife. On the car journey, Shanda is being questioned by the girls about her relationship with Heverin. This goes on for a little while until Loveless reveals herself by just shouting, "Shut it," and then threatens Shanda with the knife. Like, she holds the knife to Shanda's neck and just constantly keeps saying, "Own up that you stole Heverin from me." Even though Shanda did not steal Heverin. She didn't. She was completely innocent in all of this. She's a 12-year-old girl. Now, I need to remind you that at this point, Rippy and Lawrence both think that the extent of this is just to scare Shanda into breaking up with Heverin. But obviously, very, very clearly, this isn't what Loveless and Tackett have in mind. They get to the abandoned house and they make Shanda go in. And she's very, very, very noticeably terrified. Like, she's crying her eyes out, like really does not want to go in there, which is very understandable. And when she gets in there, they immediately tie together her wrists and her ankles and don't hesitate to start taunting her. They were saying things like, "This building has human remains in it, and yours will be here too." They even held up a t-shirt in front of Shanda's face and lit it on fire and then said, "You'll be the one that's burning next." Now, after all of this, they put Shanda back in the car and attempt to drive back, but they seem to have gotten lost because they ask for directions at a petrol station. Now, I said before that Lawrence and Rippy were kind of like passengers in all of this, and I still think that that is true to some extent, but on this journey back, both of them were texting boys just as if it was a normal night and never mentioned the whole Shanda situation at all. So if they were really that scared and they really wanted to get out of it, wouldn't they just text someone? You know, if they're getting away with texting anyway and you're that scared. But they don't say a word. We don't know why, but they don't say anything. Once the group got directions at the petrol station, they drove to the edge of some woodlands near Tackett's home in Madison. Lawrence and Hope stay in the car. It's just Loveless and Tackett at this point. Still very, very wary of this situation. That's why they stayed in the car. Because this has all gone very wrong very quickly in their minds. Because they, again, thought that they was just going to be scaring this girl, not dragging her into some forest in the middle of nowhere. So Loveless and Tackett drag Shanda out of the car and continue dragging her to an abandoned building in this woodland area. And as soon as they get there, they strip Shanda down to just her underwear, which is very obviously just a power play in all of this, because there was no need to do that. They just wanted to show their power over her, like they can belittle her. This was clearly just their way of trying to make her feel as vulnerable as possible. Once Shanda is stripped down to nothing but her underwear, Loveless immediately starts to beat her, starting with her fists and then kneeing her in the mouth until she is like just constantly bleeding, like so much blood from her mouth. She then grabs the knife and attempts to slit Shanda's throat, but it doesn't work because it's too blunt. I mean, it's a kitchen knife. Now, after all of this, Rippy now gets involved. Like I said before, Lawrence and Rippy were waiting in the car because they were too scared. Now, Rippy wants to get involved. So she gets out of the car and then helps to hold down Shanda. Now that Shanda is being held down by a third person, Loveless and Tackett take it in turns to continuously stab this 12-year-old girl over and over and over again with the blunt knife. They stab her in the chest, her abdominals, and her inner thighs. And as if this wasn't enough, Tackett then grabs a rope and strangles Shanda with it until she passes out. Now, because she passed out, they presumed that she was dead. So they put her in the trunk of the car and drove to Tackett's house. At this point, they're all covered in blood, so that's why they're going back to Tackett's house so they can clean up. But then they hear Shanda screaming from the boot of the car. She's still alive. Tackett opens the boot and stabs Shanda even more, over and over again, several times. Now they go inside. Tackett grabs a drink, as if nothing's happening, and then begins to read the girls' runstones. Now, they're not the most accurate things, but I can guarantee you that those readings were gonna, no doubt, predict that they were not gonna have a very good future. You know, maybe a future behind bars, maybe no freedom. The time is now 2:30 a.m. and Lovelace and Tackett decide that they want to go for a little drive to the countryside, with Shanda still in the boot. Up to this point, these girls have just tried to brutally murder a 12-year-old girl, and they're acting as though nothing's happened. They're just going for a little joyride through the countryside. Even though it could still very much be on their minds, it no doubt is, they're acting as if it doesn't matter in the slightest. Like, what they've done isn't a bad thing. Just out there having fun while there's a girl with multiple stab wounds in the boot of the car. And it's not as if they forgot that she was there, because they could hear her crying her eyes out. She's still alive while they're driving her around in the boot of the car in sub-zero weather. It's freezing cold. She's just in her underwear. When they eventually stop and open the boot, Shanda actually sits up. She's covered in blood, but she isn't able to communicate. She can't say anything. Clearly still annoyed that she's still alive, Tackett decides she's going to take it upon herself to finish her off. Tackett grabs a tire iron and beats Shanda with the tire iron. And she actually admitted that she felt Shanda's skull cave in. And after she beat Shanda with the tire iron, she holds it up and tells Lovelace to smell it. This is the girl that had the desire to kill. Just gonna remind you of that. And then they get back in the car and continue driving for hours and hours and hours. And in those hours, they kept stopping and opening the boot to keep beating up Shanda with the tire iron. There was no time where they thought, we'll leave her in the boot. They wanted to just keep hurting her. When it started to get light outside, they returned back to Tackett's house where the other girls were and filled the girls in about what they had done. And while they were telling the girls, they were laughing and joking about the situation. They were proud of what they did. Now, obviously, Tackett doesn't live alone. She's a young girl. She lives with her parents. So her mother now wakes up and is so furious that the girls were out until the early hours of the morning. So, because obviously her mother is annoyed, Tackett then drives Lawrence and Rippy home. Now, on this journey back, Tackett pulls over because she wants to show Lawrence and Rippy the body. Lawrence doesn't want to look. She's over it. She does not want to be involved. But Rippy is more than intrigued and actually sprays Windex into the wounds on Shanda's body and even taunts her more, saying, "You're not looking so hot now, are you?" Now, they know that they need to get rid of the body. It can't stay in the boot. So they drive to the petrol station and buy 2-litre bottles of Pepsi and empty them out and then fill them with petrol. They drive to somewhere that Rippy knew, a place called Lemon Road that was just north of Madison. And again, Lawrence stays in the car. Just as before, she doesn't want anything to do with this. The other three wrap up the body, or should I say the severely injured body, because Shanda wasn't dead. She was just in a very, very, very bad way. They wrap her up in a blanket and drag her into a field. This is when Tackett told Rippy to completely cover Shanda in petrol. And then immediately Tackett sets her on fire. Shanda was so badly injured at this point, but that didn't stop her from trying to get to her feet whilst she was completely on fire. The girls leave her burning in that field and they run away laughing. They drive away, but Lovelace noticed the fire go out, so they wanted to make sure that Shanda was actually dead, and she wasn't. So without hesitation, once again, Lovelace pours the rest of the petrol all over her and they set her on fire again. Shanda's last words were, "Mummy." That shows the bond that she had with her mother, that's who she was thinking of in her last moments. She just wanted her mother there to try and make everything better. But, I mean, there was literally nothing anybody could do in that situation. It's now 9:30 a.m. and the girls decide they're going to go for breakfast at McDonald's. And at this breakfast, they were even making disgusting, sick jokes about what had just happened, saying that the charred sausages looked like Shanda's face. What? After breakfast, they dropped Lawrence and Rippy home, and Loveless and Tackett returned back to Tackett's house. A few hours go by, so now it's late morning, and Shanda's remains were found. So this was very, very quick after the murder itself. Shanda's body was found by two brothers that were going hunting, and at first they thought it was a mannequin, because that area was not known to be violent, so their first thought was not, that's real. But as they got closer, they did discover that it was real. The police were immediately called and arrived pretty much straight away. And first they thought it was going to be like a drug deal gone wrong. With the state of the body, they thought this would have had to have been. There had to have been some sort of big motive behind this to do that to someone. One thing that needs to be mentioned is that the body was posed in a very sexual position. Like, these are children we're talking about here. 16-year-old girls and a 12-year-old victim, and they're posing the body like that. A lot of people's minds, after, like, when looking back at this, would immediately go to the fact that these kids were sexually abused growing up. So do with that what you will. Obviously, this is no excuse for what they did at all, but there could be some sort of connection. It was very hard for the police to identify the body because her hands and her face were the most severely burned. Like, they clearly made an effort to make sure that she would not be able to be identified. Not too far from the body, they found the Pepsi bottles that smelled like petrol. The coroner established that the cause of death was smoke inhalation and severe burns. So now we know for sure that her cause of death was being lit on fire. She was alive for all of it, and she felt all of it. The coroner even said that after performing thousands and thousands of autopsies in the 20 years that he was doing it, this was the worst by far. Because it was so clear that she'd gone through so much, like she'd taken so many beatings, she was in so much agony, but fought to stay alive. It shows just how much strength that 12-year-old girl had. Now, obviously, Shanda's dad has realised that she's missing, so he calls all of her friends to see if they know where she is and gets nothing. So he calls her mother and they are instantly terrified. So they call the police and they file a missing persons report. One of the main reasons why these girls were caught is because they could not keep quiet. There's a reason why they were initially caught, but further down the line when it came to their hearings, what they were doing now did not help them at all in the long run. They were bragging about it at any given opportunity. Loveless even told Hevrin what she had done. You know, her ex-girlfriend, the one she was trying to get back. She told her what she had done to Shanda. Obviously at first Hevrin did not believe her, but Loveless wanted to prove it. So she opens the boot of the car and shows her the bloody handprints and even holds up a bloody sock, but then says, keep your mouth shut. Like, I'm showing you all this, but don't tell anyone, even though I'm telling everyone myself. Hevrin is beyond horrified and isn't discreet about it, and Loveless begs her, please don't say anything. She then kisses her and promises that she will stay quiet for now. Loveless didn't know that part, but for now. There was one person that could not keep quiet, and that was Lawrence. She was completely traumatized by what had happened. So she tells her parents and they drive to the police station where she gives a statement. This was around 8:20 p.m. She doesn't try and cover up anything. She gives them names, literally saying Melinda Loveless, Laurie Tackett, and Hope Rippy. And then also says that the girl that was murdered was Shanda. She goes into detail about why she was murdered, like saying it was like a love triangle type of situation, and then said everything that they did to her. With the missing persons report and also the dental records that came back, they were able to identify the body as Shanda. It's now 2:30 a.m. on the 12th of January. The police surround Tackett's house, and Lovelace and Tackett were arrested on the spot. As they should. The police search the car, and there is tons of evidence, like the handprints, the sock, the tire iron, everything was still there. One of the really tragic things about this is that Shanda's mother only learned about all of the horrible things that happened from watching the news. Like, everyone else was too scared to tell her, because obviously it's not a nice thing, but she should have been told beforehand, so she didn't have to watch it on the TV. Now, let's talk about the trial. It's the 16th of March, 1992, and all 4 of the girls are charged as adults. Now, the prosecution made it very clear that they were seeking the death penalty for Lovelace and Tackett, because the nature of the murder was so horrendous and brutal that they felt the only punishment appropriate was the death penalty. But now, nearly a year later, in early 1993, all of them agreed to plea deals. They all plead guilty to murder, arson, and criminal confinement. And because they pleaded guilty, they got to avoid the death penalty. Rippy was initially sentenced to 60 years, but got it reduced to 35 on appeal in 2004, and actually got released in April of 2006, having only served 14 years. Seems very short for, what she did, but okay. Now, because Lawrence confessed, like she was the one that went to the police, she got to only plead guilty to only 1 count of criminal confinement. While she was waiting for her sentence in prison, she actually attempted to take her own life. Like, this was clearly eating away at her. She was sentenced to 20 years, but was released in December of 2000 after serving 9 years. Now it comes down to Lovelace and Tackett, the ringleaders. They were both sentenced to 60 years, and they actually had separate hearings, and in those separate hearings, they both just blamed everything on the other one. Teenagers being teenagers. They both served their time in the Indiana Women's Prison in Indianapolis. Is that how you say it? Indianapolis? Indianapolis? You know the place I'm talking about though. And in 1994, they both appeal. They both brought up their childhoods and how they were raised, and kind of said that that's why they did what they did. And the court looked into it all, but stuck with the sentencing that they originally gave. 14 years later, in 2008, Lovelace appealed again, but also failed again. Now, Tackett's mother speaks out, and oh boy, she said that it was her daughter's destiny to kill someone and spend her life in prison. What? If you have any sort of feeling that that is how your child is going to turn out, you do anything and everything in your power to stop that from happening. And not say, oh, it's just her destiny. It's no one's destiny to kill a person and end up in prison. If that's the path you see your child going down, you simply steer them to another path. Get her a hobby. Buy her a colouring book. I don't know how to parent. I am 25 years old and childless, but I do know that you don't just let that happen because you think it's her destiny. I'm getting too worked up, I need to move on. Tackett gets released from prison on the 11th of January 2018, which is actually the 26th anniversary of the day that Shanda died. Lovelace served 26 years in prison, and in those 26 years, she worked on the Indiana Canine Assessment Network prison program, which is where they train puppies for the disabled. And in 2012, one of the breeders actually got in touch with Shanda's mother and said, please just watch this video of Lovelace training the puppies. Any other mother would have been like, who do you think you are? Why are you sending me this video and asking me to watch a video of the girl that killed my daughter? I don't want to know. But no, Shanda's mother does in fact watch the video. That itself shows what kind of woman she was. After watching it, she said, I was taken aback. I saw someone almost reborn. She was sincere. She was compassionate. Shanda's mother even donated a puppy for Lovelace to train in honour of her daughter. And her reasoning behind this, because even after she did that, everyone around her was like, why would you do that? Why are you contributing to this girl's journey in there? Like, leave her to rot in that prison, essentially. But her reasoning behind it was that if you don't let good things come from bad things, then nothing gets better. Her plan is to donate a puppy every single year in her daughter's memory. Loveless was released from prison in September 2019 at the age of 43. Now, just a little bit of side info. Because of all the evidence that came out about Loveless's father, throughout all of this, after her appealing, he was actually arrested in 1993. But he didn't actually stay in there long because he was only charged on one count of sexual battery and actually got released in 1995. Now, a really sad thing is that Shanda's father essentially died of a broken heart. He was so heartbroken about this situation and what had happened to his daughter, not just the fact that she got murdered, but the way that she had, that he ended up drinking himself to death. Oh my god, that poor 12-year-old girl. 12. I have no words about this story. 12. Yeah, this was not nice. This was not a nice story. None of them ever are, but come on. Makeup's done. Went for a little rhinestone look. I don't have much to say. Like, I'm pretty much speechless after this, so I'm just gonna love and leave you. Hope you're having a great day. Hope this didn't put a downer on your day too much. Make sure you like and subscribe, turn on the little notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. And yeah, I shall see you in the next one. Goodbye!